Margie, I just want to just to pick up on the notion of the local and global. You're particularly interested in schools that are miles away from anywhere and the challenges that they face, aren't you? The kind of the remote problem.
Sure, yeah. I suppose in Science Foundation Ireland we have quite a significant outreach programme in that we deliver some of them like Science Week and Discover Primary Science and Maths, but we also fund a significant number, like we co-fund and contribute towards today, and a number of things like Coder Dojo and all of that. On top of that, we have quite a really good presence in, I suppose, urban centres where we'd have a huge either industry presence or research presence which can get involved with local schools. But we want to make sure, obviously, that we are engaging with the school at the very top of Donegal and, you know, a lot of the Midland schools you were bringing up here mightn't have as ready access to activities and also to role models because the industry cluster isn't there, and so I suppose that's a big thing for us. So on one side it's the technology. We're really interested in how technology can bring programs that are having a really good impact in a local context to schools that maybe fall outside of that cluster, and we could use technology to bring them into those more rural, I suppose, schools. The second bit then is the role model bit. I think we were talking about it earlier. I grew up in a family where I have this picture of me. I'm 5 and I'm the youngest of a row of my cousins and my sister. And there's 5 of us in the picture. And 4 out of the 5 went on to become engineers. And it's 4 girls and 1 boy. We didn't realise that we broke the mould there until I came into the outreach area and actually worked in engineering, which is still only 9% female. I didn't realise that there was this barrier because I was surrounded by people that I felt I would fit in with because that's what my family was. But as we run the Smart Futures programme, which gives access of role models to schools, and we conducted research on that and asked 2,000 students in first year in college, well, why did you choose the college course that you chose? And the number one answer at 62% was they felt they would fit into the course that they chose. And those that got advised by their parents said that the number one thing they were told is that it would suit their personality. And so if you have no access to somebody who, you know, really loves and has a passion for their technology or their engineering, then that problem's going to pretty much perpetuate. And we have such a low presence, in particular of girls at the moment, that having access to role models and using tech to be able to reach out to people is very important to us.
And you can see from Chekhov or things like it, the people talking to each other remotely that allows you to reach role models that you don't necessarily have to be sitting next to.
Exactly. We have 2 significant research centres at the moment. One, Amber, which looks at nanotech, so looking at things in the tiny sense. And another one down in Limerick called SSPC, which looks at how, you know, pharmaceuticals are produced. But they're running a project called, you know, Science Live, and that basically means that a school that signs up for that will be lent microscopy equipment, and then they are Skyped into the live big microscopy unit in Trinity, and it takes them through tutorials with it, and the kids get to ask questions, they get to explore their own samples under the microscopes, and it's that kind of thing that we're finding is bringing the research out of the lab and into people's lives so they understand the impact it's having.
Adi, Margie referred to, you know, the distance Dublin to Donegal, but in a way you're thinking about Dublin to Dakar in Senegal or in Nigeria, and you were bringing FLL, First Lego League, to Nigeria. Can you tell us what that is, and then maybe speak a little bit about the importance of mobile in bridging these huge geographical gaps that are like Ireland but scaled up by a factor of 10 or 20?
FLL, it's an acronym for First Lego League. It's a program that inspires kids to think like scientists. The buzzword around now is all about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, and we realize that immersive programs, technology programs like FLL, it's very useful for kids because kids don't want to, from doing this program, I've realized that kids like to ask their own questions. They don't want you to ask them too much questions. They want to start discussions. They want to engage each other and talk to each other and work collaboratively on projects. And the FLL program has four elements. One is the robot design, where you give them Lego equipment in parts, and they build this up using their own imagination. You'll be surprised with what they will come up with. We had 28 teams, and no two teams had the same kind of design. So, they're pretty much limited by their own imagination. And we found out that the mentors learned more from the kids than the kids did from the mentors. So it's the era of collaborative learning, and it teaches them how to be human beings. We have one element called the core values, where the kids would have to display stuff like gracious professionalism, and even in the face of stiff competition, they'll be able to work together as a team, collaborate, and work cooperatively. And Lego coined a word called coopetition, that cooperation in the face of stiff competition. Now to the mobile, we in Africa, we leapfrog technology. And the leapfrogging technology in the area of mobile is not by design. Some would argue that this is rather opportunistic, because we don't have the same infrastructure that exists in the West. About 31% of Africans live about 25 kilometers away from the fiber node. So mobile just came and became the useful technology, because it doesn't have that same investment, the big investments that you need for the normal telephony to work. And increasing mobile penetration by 10%, according to Columbia University, would increase the GDP of Africa by 1.2%. I mean, in countries like Ghana, Tanzania, this has been proven that it increased by 1.2%. So it's in the context of what we're talking about today, local school, global reach, using mobile telephony or mobile technology for education. We can, the MOOCs are the massive open online courses are global now. They've made distance between Accra and distance between Ireland shorter, because you could go online, take courses. These courses, online courses are inherently modular, so you don't really have to sit there to take the training at the same time. You could go. I'm doing a course in DCU. I don't have to log on to attend the webinar as at that time. I could go at a later date, check what's been recorded, and this is opening education up to kids as far back as, as far as Tanzania, as Afghanistan, everywhere in the world. It's made education accessible to everybody.
And also, I suppose, there's an opportunity for creating these little twinning, these little bilateral links between a school in Clontuskert and a school in Abuja. Like and no need for government. No need for anyone else to organise. You don't need a big sign on the way into town saying "twinned with." These are little relationships that can be created through mobile and through apps like what we spoke about earlier. Yeah,
that's part of what we're working on. We're twinning schools, where a school in Castlebar, for instance, would dial in to connect with another school in Kenya, in the remote village of Kenya, where they could share ideas. And because in the nearest future, they'll be working on the same project. Kids in Ireland will be working on the same kind of project with kids in Abuja, and they can work collaboratively on this project, and using Skype and all these other means of technology that we have today. So the future of education is exciting.
I can have this image of kids in Kenya being shocked at the state of some of the roads in the west of Ireland. Dominic, in your role as a director of an education centre, I suppose you have to think as well about the human aspect of all this technology, and essentially technology is still just a tool, and it's all about the relationships between the children and the teachers, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you could sit back and say, why in God's name would we even do any of this? And I was thinking about 100 years ago when I was doing the Leaving Cert, and you had a very simple set of choices when you finished the Leaving Cert in terms of what you wanted to do afterwards, because the world seemed very predictable. And you roll forward to 2015, and the same student doing a Leaving Cert has got a plethora of choices, and they're not even sure whether the choice they make will give them employment, or whether, you know, this lovely notion that there are jobs coming down the path for our children that are not even invented now. So how do we prepare those children for those jobs if we don't even know what the jobs are going to be? And I think that's where we have to look at this fantastic technology that's around us, and use it, but use it in that sense that it is all, and the notion of this lifelong learning, it is all part of that lifelong learning. We just have to shape our attitude to it slightly differently. And ultimately, education is all about the human interactions and the connections, because if you don't have those, people who teach know that in the classroom, if that human interaction is not there between you and the students, or between the students and each other, or the students and you, your efforts are diminished greatly. So there is that whole relationship thing that's going on that needs to be reinforced. But the technology lends itself to it, and there were 3 words that Kate used in her presentation, which are very simple words, but they're very powerful words. She spoke about open, she spoke about trust, and she spoke about fun. And if you look at those 3 words in the context of what happens in the classroom, I think both the teacher and the student, if they're open to new experiences and learning, it makes it a really wonderful place. If there's trust there, that they can trust each other, that you can say to your students, or any teacher can say to their students, go and do something, and in their own mind they're saying, I'm trusting you that what you're going to come up with is going to be acceptable. And the students will respond to that in spades, that they always do. And I was in this room earlier on this week, and Professor John Coolhan was making a presentation, and he was talking about the word we use very little about in education, and that's the word fun. And we all know when we're having fun with doing things, the task seems so much simpler and so much easier and so much more enjoyable. And it's that challenge of bringing fun back into it, and technology lends itself to that, because the children are just so engrossed in what they're doing. Learning becomes much easier. But the human is there. The human has to be there all the time. And even the notion, which I think is this notion of either workers or students in different countries collaborating with each other on the same project. You know, if that starts in school, those students will grow up with that expectation. And if it's what they do as the norm in school, they will just treat it as the norm when they leave school as well too.
Kate, what you've done so far and your interactions with the apps you've spoken about earlier, such as the Chekhov Story Author, can you measure its impact? Have you been able to see how it's helped? And particularly, you spoke about kids with different abilities. Have you been able to see the impact it's had on them? And does it need formal measurement, or how is it measured?
So say in terms of what the students have learned, first of all, the junior students in our own school have been hugely excited because they've been able to download their own book on their own device. And they've also branched out from that, and they've been able to download other people's books as well. So, you know, they've gone towards their interest set as well. So they'll often download a book that we might have deemed would be too difficult for them, but yet because they have an interest in it, they'll go off and they'll download in that area. For the older students, the outcomes for them, they're really getting to see, I suppose, behind the curtain of education that sometimes we as teachers put up. And I think that's really important, that they get to see, well, it's not, you know, this magical, mystical land, and we're just, you know,
Wizards.
yeah, well, as teachers, and that also that, you know, that they're passive consumers of this, that they're active agents in creating this world, and that they can help other students, both in our own school, but beyond that. So what was really powerful for us, I suppose, is that we can now see where it's been downloaded across the world. So that's really excited our children. And then in terms of measurement, so you saw that we had worked on the children coming up with their own form of assessment. But again, we have done surveys with the children and, you know, that we're collating that information at the moment. And for them, I think, you know, there have been lots of different successes, you know. Some of the areas that we really had to work on as well, you know, it wasn't just creating the books and writing very simple sentences. They also had to come up with, you know, tone. They had to work on their speech patterns. You know, we did a lesson on how would you make this book more exciting? Are you going to speak in a monotone all the way across? And actually that was something that they struggled with at the start, because you have to time yourself to the audio. So a lot of the stories were coming out as, I went to the shop, because they were so focused on the pace. So then we did a lot of work on, well, how are you going to make that more interesting? And it was amazing for me to see the students that may have struggled with literacy really engaging with that, and how, say, the older students in my class were able to mentor the younger students as well. So there's been amazing outcomes in so many different areas.
Just getting back, we'll go to the audience for a few questions. There's one thing that struck me. You talked about the students peeking behind the curtain, and also Dominic mentioned the word trust. Did you have to change your mindset as a teacher, and this is my role, and this is what I was trained, the role I was trained to be in, but now I'm giving them more autonomy? Did you have to go through a little realignment of your own, what you consider important in a classroom?
Completely, but I think it's happened for me a long time ago. Basically, the backstory, I started teaching in a small school called Kilvemnin in Tipperary back in 2004, and I had done a summer course with Tommy Marr in Kilkenny Education Centre on Lego robotics, as it happened to be at the time. And Tommy was involved with the Empowering Minds group, and he encouraged me to get involved with the Empowering Minds group. And I met a whole cohort of teachers that were really passionate and really eager to share. So that started me on that journey. And then when I started in Kilvemnin, I was really lucky. They had been one of the pilot schools for the Lego project with Empowering Minds. And then that first year, I went into a school where the students were more skilled than I was. So I suddenly had to say, okay, am I going to park this and not let them use the tech and use the, you know, what they've been using for the past 5 years? Or am I going to say, okay, teach me? And I think that was a real game changer for me. So that was 11 years ago. And since then, you know, I've made lots of inroads in that, but I've seen and met so many teachers across Ireland and across the world that are also on that journey, and that have also come to that conclusion that we have so much to learn from the students. I think it was really interesting on the panel last night, the students that were here from primary, secondary and tertiary, that is something that they're yearning for. They want to be, you know, have more, I suppose, more ownership of their own learning, and it's really important to give them that.
It's great to hear. And I mean, it's even in business, they always say you should hire somebody who is better than you. You know, so let's go to we have a couple of roving mics around. So if we definitely have one question there, man in the glasses.
Hello, how are you doing? Paul Cawley. I work in digital marketing, so outside of the education directly. Given the varied background and experiences of the panel, I was wondering if they might give us some insights if this was a perfect world, what they would like to see be the aims, goals and outcomes that might come from an EdTech event like Excited, and then looking at it more pragmatically, what we as a community might be able to do to help achieve those goals, or at least start moving in the right direction to achieve them.
That's probably a whole discussion, that one, isn't it? Just brief answers to that one. So just you're happy with the questions? Okay, so who wants to take that first?
Okay. I think people often say we're on the cusp of a revolution when it comes to EdTech. I think we're in the middle of the revolution, and we're swimming through that revolution and finding our way through it. I think that it's really important for industry, and I have seen that they have been getting involved, and something that, you know, that is really strong is that, you know, maybe industry coming to education and saying, well, what can we do for you, as opposed to, would you try this out and see if it works? That it's really important that, you know, like as teachers, that we are given those opportunities. And you know, there's a big thing in America in terms of corporate social responsibility, and it's something that I think could be accessed more in Ireland. And again, you know, there have been lots of trailblazers in that area, but it'd be wonderful to see it more widespread across the country.
Margie, do you want to take it next?
Yeah, sure. I agree. In the formal sense, motivating industry and education collaboration. Actually, from a personal side, I really think that, to coin the power of one phrase, to actually activate each and every one of us on our role in this. I was talking earlier that I'm from a civil engineering background, probably had a bit of a fear of code and all of that. But decided, seeing as I'm singing the praises and involved in so many projects in this area, I have a 5 and 7-year-old, that I should start getting them going down that road. So we've been doing this hour of code, which I'm not going to go in. I know you're going to be talking about it a bit later, but we've been doing it. And it's been a real learning experience for me, where, you know, that kind of feel the fear and do it anyway, because I don't know the answers, but I'm exploring it with my kids, and quite often they come up with the answers quicker than I do. And that, like you were saying, the journey you've been through, Kate, that's a real eye-opener for me. But I do think, you know, there's a parent role in there, there's a teacher role, there's listening to the kids and the proactivity that they have in this space. So for me, while the formal structure, and we're part of the formal structure, is very important, that power of the one, each of us taking responsibility and introducing and growing this.
Paddy?
Yeah, I think the educational sector is ripe for some level of disruptive innovation. This is happening in the industry, and this should continue to happen in the education sector segment. There's really not much happening right now, and I realize that we're not involving, if you want to do open innovation, you need to involve the stakeholders from the very start of that innovation process, so you can fail fast. That's not happening. We're not involving the students who we're targeting in the innovative process. We need to carry them along. So the part of the theme for the FLL program this year is World Class, where we throw to the kids and say to them, we want you to tell us how you want to learn. And we were surprised the kind of things they came up with. Some kids, some group in Nigeria came up with the idea of how to teach people how to learn about deforestation. Another group came up with the idea of how to teach female genital mutilation, you know, which is prevalent in Africa. So we need to start involving the stakeholders in that innovation process. So whatever we're going to come up with, we're going to design, would be something that they really want. So I think, similar to what they do in the industry, we need to carry the stakeholders along from the very first step of the innovation process.
And finally, Dominic.
I think one of the great things about something like this is it shows things are working, and they keep working, and we're in the middle of the revolution, but you need events like this to convince others that the revolution is still going on and still happening. And at the same time, I think probably those who are working in the school are never going to get permission to continue going on doing what you're doing, because maybe everyone is not totally convinced yet. And you can't wait for everyone to be totally convinced, and you can't wait for permission. You just have to take and suck energy from an event like this, and to continue doing what you're doing and do more of it and show the world that it works. And I think that's one of the things. Secondly, on the industry side of things, I think, and I'm not trying to be down on industry, but often education had to take tools that were designed for business and use them in an educational context. And they were very creative and very innovative in doing that. But every now and then, it would be nice to take tools that are designed for education and use them in an education context. Now, don't ask me what those tools are, but you know, it would be nice if those tools were available. And I think maybe we saw samples of that there this morning, you know, because the earlier part of this was use the tools that are available to industry in school. But we might need tools that we should be using in school.
Thank you very much. I would love to get more questions, but I'm seeing a red light already, and if we start off late, we'll end up finishing tomorrow. So we have to draw this panel to a close. Can you give a huge round of applause to all our panellists? To Kate Murray, to Dominic McAvoy, to Adi Ademola, and also to Margie McCarthy. So give them a round of applause there, and we'll move on.